The space station bar was almost empty. Only a few traders sat in dark corners drinking alien liquor and speaking in whispers. The air smelled of engine oil and something sweet that humans could not identify. Blue lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the metal walls. Elena Rodriguez checked her recording device one more time. She was a journalist from Earth News Network, and today she would interview someone very special. Someone who had fought against humans 30 years ago during the Terran Galactic War. Someone who had seen things that no other alien was willing to talk about. Across the small table sat Vextar. He was a Kelani, one of the four-armed aliens who had tried to conquer Earth 3 decades earlier. His skin was gray like old stone, and his eyes looked like broken glass that caught the light in strange ways. 2 of his forearms rested on the table while the other 2 hung at his sides. A small metal device on his neck would translate his words into human language. Vextar stared into his drink. It was something thick and green that bubbled softly. He had agreed to this meeting after months of Elena asking, but now he seemed to regret it. His hands shook slightly as he lifted the glass to his mouth. "Thank you for meeting with me," Elena said softly. She knew this was not easy for him. "I know talking about the war is difficult," the alien nodded slowly. His translator made a small clicking sound before his words came out in perfect English. "I have never spoken about what happened on your world. Not to anyone. Not even to my own family. Why now?" Elena asked. "Why are you willing to talk after all these years?" Vextar was quiet for a long time. Around them, the space station hummed with the sound of life support systems and distant engines. A transport ship docked somewhere far below, making the floor vibrate slightly. "Because I am old," he finally said, "and because the nightmares never stopped. Maybe if I tell someone, they will finally leave me alone." Elena leaned forward. "Tell me about the beginning, when your people first decided to attack Earth." The old Kalani warrior looked up at her. His strange eyes seemed to see through her as if he was looking at something far away and long ago. "We thought it would be easy. Your people had just learned to travel between stars. Your weapons were primitive. Your armies were small. The Kalani Empire had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Earth was supposed to be number 48. He paused and took another drink. "We were so confident. The military leaders said we would control your planet in 6 months. Maybe less. We had ships that could destroy cities from space. We had weapons that could melt through your strongest metals. We had soldiers who had never lost a battle. But something went wrong," Elena said. Vexatar made a sound that might have been laughter, but there was no humor in it. "Everything went wrong. But not in the way you might think. Your military fought well, but that was not the problem. We expected resistance. We expected your soldiers to fight and die. What we did not expect was—" He stopped talking and stared into his drink again. Elena waited. She could see that whatever he was remembering was painful. "We did not expect you to be human," he said quietly. "I don't understand." "Of course you do not. How could you? You have always been human. You do not know what it looks like from the outside." Vextar's forearms moved restlessly. "When the Kalani Empire conquers a world, the people fight for a while, then they surrender. It is logical. It is sensible. When you cannot win, you stop fighting and try to survive. Every intelligent species in the galaxy understands this." Elena nodded, encouraging him to continue. "But humans are different. We learned this on the first day of the invasion. I was part of the force that landed on the Korean peninsula. My unit was commanded by war leader Thakmor, one of our best officers. He had conquered 12 worlds before Earth. He expected the local military to fight for a few days, maybe a week, then surrender when they realized they could not win." The alien's voice grew softer, as if he was afraid someone might hear. "Instead, we met Captain Minho Kim." "Tell me about him," Elena said. Vextar closed his eyes. He was not tall, even for a human. His uniform was old and patched in several places. His weapons were basic projectile rifles that should have been useless against our armor. His unit had maybe 200 soldiers, while we had 3,000. By every military calculation, the battle should have lasted less than an hour. How long did it actually last? 3 days. 3 days of fighting that made no sense to any of us. Captain Kim's soldiers held a mountain pass that we needed to control. Every time we pushed them back, they regrouped and attacked again. When they ran out of ammunition, they used rocks and metal bars. When they ran out of those, they used their hands. Vexatar opened his eyes and looked directly at Elena. I watched human soldiers carry their wounded friends to safety while they were bleeding to death themselves. I saw a medic named Dr. Ji-young Park treating injured men under heavy plasma fire, refusing to leave even when the medical station was destroyed around her. I saw Lieutenant Hyunwoo Lee coordinating the defense from a bombed-out building, staying at his post even when the roof collapsed on him. That sounds like normal military behavior, Elena said, though she felt proud of her species. No, Vextar said firmly. It was not normal. When Kalani soldiers are wounded, they withdraw to be treated. When a position cannot be held, we abandon it. When the odds are hopeless, we surrender. This is rational. This is how war works everywhere else in the galaxy. He leaned forward, his strange eyes intense. But your Captain Kim did something I had never seen in 40 years of military service. On the third day, when his position was completely surrounded and his men had no ammunition left, he sent us a message. Do you know what it said? Elena shook her head. It said, "Come and take it." 4 words that changed everything I thought I knew about war. 4 words that still give me nightmares. The alien veteran fell silent again. Elena could see that this was only the beginning of his story, and already it was clear that whatever happened next would be something extraordinary. Something that would explain why the mighty Kalani Empire had failed to conquer one small blue planet. Outside the bar's small window, stars glittered in the darkness of space, cold and distant, but Elena knew that among those stars was Earth, home to a species that had somehow impressed their enemies so much that 30 years later, an alien soldier still woke up screaming from dreams of human courage. Vextar stared at his drink for a long moment before continuing. Elena could see his forearms trembling slightly. Whatever memory he was accessing was clearly painful, even after 3 decades. After Captain Kim sent that message, War Leader Thakmor was furious, the alien said. He ordered a full assault. Every weapon we had, every soldier in the area. He wanted to show the humans what happened to species that defied the Kalani Empire. Elena adjusted her recording device. What happened next? We attacked at dawn on the 4th day. 3,000 Kalani soldiers against maybe 50 humans who were still alive in that mountain pass. We had plasma cannons, energy shields, and air support. They had broken rifles and determination. Vextar paused. I thought it would be over in minutes. The old warrior lifted his glass with one of his right arms while his left arms gestured as he spoke. But Captain Kim had done something during the night. He had moved his remaining soldiers to new positions, hidden them in places we did not expect. When we charged up that mountain thinking we were attacking a defeated enemy, they hit us from everywhere at once. 50 soldiers stopped 3,000? Elena asked, amazed. Not stopped, but they made us pay for every step, every rock, every tree, every bend in the path cost us soldiers, and the strangest thing was how they fought. Kalani warriors are trained to preserve themselves. We attack when we have advantages, retreat when we do not. But these humans attacked when they should have retreated, held positions they should have abandoned. Vextar's strange crystalline eyes reflected the blue light from overhead. I remember one moment clearly. A young human soldier, barely old enough to fight, was trapped behind a fallen boulder. He was wounded, bleeding from his head. 5 of my units surrounded him. Any rational being would surrender. Instead, he smiled at us and pulled the pin from an explosive device. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. He killed himself rather than surrender? He killed himself to take 5 of us with him, but that was not the worst part. The worst part was what he said before the explosion. He looked right at me and said, "Tell them we were here." As if it mattered that we remembered him. The alien took a long drink from his glass. That was when I first understood that we were not fighting a normal war. We were fighting something else entirely, something that did not follow the rules we knew. Elena leaned forward. Tell me about Dr. Ji-young Park. You mentioned her before. Vextar nodded slowly. She was the most dangerous human I ever met, not because she carried weapons, but because she showed us something we had never seen. She had set up a medical station in a cave halfway up the mountain. When our plasma fire destroyed it, she moved to another location. When that was destroyed, she moved again. That sounds like normal military medical procedure. No, you do not understand. She was not just treating human soldiers. On the 2nd day, she found 3 wounded Kalani warriors who had been left behind during a retreat. They were dying from their injuries, calling out for help in our language. Elena's eyes widened. What did she do? She treated them. In the middle of a battle where we were trying to kill her people, she saved the lives of 3 enemy soldiers. She used her limited medical supplies on us. She risked her own safety to drag our wounded to shelter. Vextar's voice became quieter. When my unit found her treating our soldiers, she looked up at us and said in broken Kalani, "They are hurt. I help hurt people." The space station hummed around them as Elena absorbed this information. How did your soldiers react? They did not know what to do. Our training never covered this situation. We were taught that enemies try to kill you. We were not taught what to do when enemies try to save you. Vexatar gestured with 2 of his arms. War leader Thakmor ordered us to arrest her as a prisoner, but she refused to leave her patients. She said the wounded Kailani soldiers needed her care. So she became a prisoner? For one day, yes. But that night Captain Kim's forces attacked our camp to rescue her. They risked the lives of 20 human soldiers to save 1 medic. And when they found her, she was still treating our wounded warriors even though she was technically our captive. Elena shook her head in amazement. What happened to her? Captain Kim's soldiers freed her, but she refused to leave immediately. She finished treating the Kalani wounded first, then made sure they had enough medical supplies before she would go. One of our soldiers, a young warrior named Ketvar, asked her why she helped enemies. She said something I will never forget. Vextar paused and looked directly at Elena. She said, "Pain is pain. It does not matter what species feels it." And then she handed Ketvar a bandage for a cut on his arm and walked away. That must have been confusing for your soldiers. Confusing does not begin to describe it. We had been taught that humans were primitive, violent creatures who needed to be controlled for their own good. But Dr. Park showed us compassion that we had never seen, even among our own people. She treated enemies better than many Kalani treat their own wounded. The old alien finished his drink and signaled for another. Lieutenant Hyunwoo Lee was different, but equally disturbing to us. He ran communications for the human forces in that area. Even after we destroyed his main radio equipment, he kept finding ways to coordinate between scattered human units. How? He used everything. Old civilian radios, emergency beacons even, signal flags and mirrors when electronic communication was impossible. But the strangest thing was what he transmitted. Other military forces send tactical information, troop movements, supply needs. Lieutenant Lee sent something else. Elena waited for him to continue. He sent messages about the soldiers. Personal messages. Private Chan's wife had a baby yesterday. Sergeant Park's mother is proud of him. Corporal Yoon wants everyone to know he is thinking about home. He turned a military communication network into a way for humans to stay connected to each other. Why was that disturbing? Vextar's forearms moved restlessly. Because it worked. Those personal messages made the human soldiers fight harder, not softer. When a Kalani warrior knows his family is safe at home, he can focus on the battle. But when a human soldier knows his family is counting on him, he becomes unstoppable. Lieutenant Lee understood something about warfare that we did not. The alien looked out the small window at the stars beyond. By the end of that first week, my unit had lost 400 soldiers taking one mountain pass from 50 humans. War leader Thakmor called for reinforcements, but he also sent a report back to the Empire. He requested permission to use orbital bombardment to clear the area. Did you get permission? Yes. But before we could use it, Captain Kim did something that changed everything again. He sent us another message, but this time it was not defiant words. It was a video. Elena leaned forward eagerly. What was in the video? Vextar was quiet for a moment. It showed Dr. Park treating wounded soldiers from both sides. It showed Lieutenant Lee coordinating food drops for civilian refugees. It showed human soldiers sharing their rations with hungry Kalani prisoners. Captain Kim's message was simple. This is who we are. This is what you are fighting. The alien veteran looked down at his new drink. That video was broadcast across all frequencies. Every Kalani soldier in the invasion force saw it. And for the first time since the war began, some of us started to wonder if we were fighting the right enemy. Elena could see that this was just the beginning of Vextar's story. The first encounter with human resilience had clearly shaken the alien invaders. But she knew there was much more to come. The real horrors and the real revelations were still ahead. Outside the bar window, the stars continued their eternal dance, cold and distant. But somewhere among them was a small blue world whose people had taught an alien warrior that there were things more important than victory. Vextar ordered another drink before continuing his story. Elena noticed that his hands shook more with each glass, as if the alcohol was loosening memories he had kept locked away for decades. After the mountain pass, our commanders decided to change tactics, the alien said. Instead of small engagements, they would focus on taking major population centers. The plan was to capture the port city of Busan and use it as a base for conquering the rest of the Korean peninsula. Elena checked her recording device. How large was the force sent to Busan? 15,000 Kalani soldiers, supported by atmospheric fighters and heavy artillery. The humans had maybe 3,000 military personnel in the city, plus whatever civilian police and emergency workers they could arm. Vextar paused. By every military calculation, the siege should have lasted 1 week at most. But it didn't. It lasted 37 days. 37 days that taught me more about human nature than I wanted to know. The old warrior's forearms moved nervously. I was assigned to a unit responsible for securing the communications infrastructure. Our job was to find Lieutenant Hyunwoo Lee and stop him from coordinating the human defense. Vextar took a long drink. We tracked his signals to a bombed-out building in the city center. When we arrived, we found a communications center that should not have existed. The main building had been destroyed by our orbital bombardment on the first day, but the humans had rebuilt it in the basement using salvaged equipment. Was Lieutenant Lee there? Oh yes, he was there, sitting at a desk made from concrete blocks and metal plates, operating a radio system built from spare parts and civilian electronics. When we burst through the door, weapons ready, he looked up at us and said, "Please wait one moment. I am coordinating a medical evacuation." Elena stared at him. He asked enemy soldiers to wait while he finished his work? That was exactly what he did. And the strangest part was that my unit commander actually waited. There was something about the way Lieutenant Lee said it, so calm and professional, that made us hesitate. He finished directing an ambulance to pick up wounded civilians, then looked at us and said, "Now I can come with you." The alien shook his head slowly. But before we could arrest him, something happened that I still do not understand. Civilians started coming down the stairs into the basement. Old people, children, women carrying babies. They surrounded us not with weapons but with their bodies. They were protecting him. An elderly woman stepped forward and spoke to our translator. She said, "Lieutenant Lee helped evacuate my grandchildren when the bombing started. He found medicine for my husband. He makes sure the orphan children get food every day. If you want to take him, you have to go through us first." Vextar's crystalline eyes reflected the bar's dim lighting. My unit commander, Subleader Nakthen, had conquered 6 worlds before Earth. He had never encountered anything like this. Kalani civilians always flee from combat zones. They do not stand between soldiers and their objectives. Elena leaned forward. "What did you do?" "We retreated. 15 armed Kalani warriors retreated from 1 human communications officer and a group of unarmed civilians. Sub-Leader Nakthen reported that the target had been temporarily secured and requested new orders." The alien made that sound that might have been bitter laughter. "We spent the next week trying to find another way to stop Lieutenant Lee's broadcasts. Did you succeed?" "No. Every time we destroyed one of his radio stations, 2 more appeared somewhere else. He had trained dozens of civilians to operate communication equipment. He had hidden backup radios in hospitals, schools, even private homes. Most importantly, he had taught the human population that staying connected was more important than staying safe." Vextar gestured with his upper arms. But Lieutenant Lee was not the only problem. The real nightmare was the civilians themselves. In every other conquest, civilian populations flee from combat areas or hide in their homes until the fighting ends. Busan civilians did something different. What did they do? They fought, not as soldiers but as citizens protecting their home. Old men who had served in earlier wars taught young people how to make explosives from household chemicals. Women organized supply networks to keep food and medicine flowing to the defenders. Children served as messengers, running through bombed streets to carry information between resistance groups. The alien veteran's voice grew quieter. I remember one incident clearly. Our unit was searching for weapons caches in a residential neighborhood. We entered a house where an elderly couple lived with their adult daughter and 2 grandchildren. Standard procedure was to question them and search for contraband. Elena waited as Vextar paused to drink. The old man invited us to sit down and offered us tea, while we were occupying his city and threatening his family. His wife brought out food and insisted we eat something. The daughter played with her children as if nothing unusual was happening. The grandfather asked about our families, our home world, what we missed most about being away from home. How did you respond? We were confused. This was not resistance as we understood it. They were not trying to kill us or hide information from us. They were treating us like unwelcome guests rather than enemy invaders. It was more disturbing than open hostility. Vextar's forearms moved restlessly. As we were leaving, the grandfather gave each of us a small gift. A hand-carved wooden figure, something children on their world might play with. He said, "So you remember that families live here. So you remember that we are people, not targets." The old warrior looked directly at Elena. That was the first time I realized that humans were fighting a completely different war than we were. We were fighting to conquer territory and resources. They were fighting to protect something we could not even understand. What happened to that family? 3 days later, our artillery destroyed their neighborhood during a push toward the port facilities. I do not know if they survived. Vextar's voice was barely above a whisper. I still have the wooden figure the grandfather gave me. I've carried it for 30 years. Elena felt a chill. Tell me about the final assault on Busan. It began on the 35th day of the siege. Our commanders had grown impatient with the slow progress. They ordered a massive coordinated attack using every unit in the area. The plan was to overwhelm the human defenses through sheer numbers and firepower. The alien finished his drink in one swallow. The assault began at dawn. We advanced through the city streets in formation, expecting scattered resistance from exhausted human soldiers. Instead, we found something that defied all military logic. What? The humans had evacuated all civilians from the port area, but they had not abandoned it. A team of engineers led by a woman named Yoonji Cho had spent weeks rigging the entire district with explosives. Not just military targets, but everything. Warehouses, docks, fuel storage facilities, even residential buildings. Vextar's eyes stared into the distance. When our forces reached the port, they found Captain Kim's remaining soldiers waiting for them. Maybe 200 humans against 5,000 Kalani warriors. The humans were positioned around the detonation controls and Captain Kim stood next to Yoonji Cho at the main trigger. Elena held her breath. Captain Kim broadcast one final message to our forces. He said, "You came here to take our city. Instead, we give it to you as a gift. May you find it useful." Then Yoonji Cho looked directly at our observation drones and said, "I am sorry for what we must do. Please tell our families we love them." The alien's voice cracked. She pressed the button while looking into the camera. I saw her face in those final moments. She was crying, but she did not hesitate. She destroyed everything rather than let us have it. Elena stared at him in horror. How many died? The explosion killed 3,000 Kalani soldiers instantly. The secondary explosions and fires killed another 1,000 over the following days. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was realizing that Yoonji Cho and her engineers had stayed behind to make sure the detonation worked properly. They could have escaped, but they chose to die with their city rather than let enemies benefit from their life's work. Vextar was quiet for a long moment. That night, Subleader Nakthan sent a report to Fleet Command. He recommended that the Kalani Empire abandon the conquest of Earth immediately. He said we were not fighting a species we could defeat, because defeat and victory meant different things to humans than they did to us. What was the response? Fleet Command relieved him of duty and sent fresh troops to replace our losses. They said Subleader Nakthan had been psychologically compromised by extended combat exposure. The alien looked directly at Elena, but I knew he was right. After Busan, everything changed for those of us who survived. We stopped thinking of humans as enemies and started thinking of them as something much more dangerous. What? Teachers. You were teaching us things about courage and sacrifice that our species had never learned. Things that made us question everything we thought we knew about war, about conquest, about what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. Elena realized that Vextar's story was far from over. The siege of Busan had been traumatic for the alien forces, but she sensed that even greater revelations were still to come. The humans had shown them something that would Vextar had grown quiet after describing the destruction of Busan. Elena could see that each memory was taking a toll on the old alien warrior. His forearms now rested heavily on the table, and his crystalline eyes seemed dimmer than before. After Busan, the war changed, he finally said. Our commanders realized that taking cities was too costly. They decided to focus on eliminating the human resistance networks that were coordinating the defense. My unit was reassigned to urban pacification duties in Seoul. Elena adjusted her recording device. What did that involve? We were supposed to hunt down resistance cells hiding in the city's underground areas. The humans had turned their subway tunnels into a maze of hiding places, supply depots, and communication centers. Our job was to clear them out and capture their leaders. The alien lifted his glass with a shaking hand. I thought it would be easier than fighting in the open. Underground warfare has rules. Limited escape routes, predictable choke points, clear tactical advantages for the side with better weapons. But humans do not follow rules that make sense to other species. What made it different? They turned the underground into something that was part battlefield, part psychological warfare, and part nightmare. Vextar's voice grew quieter. The resistance cell we were hunting was led by a former police officer named Dong-Yun. Intelligence reports said he had maybe 30 fighters with him. Elena leaned forward. 30 fighters against how many of your soldiers? 200 Kalani warriors, plus support equipment and heavy weapons. We thought we would clear the tunnels in a few days. Instead, we spent 3 weeks down there, and it was the most terrifying experience of my military career. The old warrior paused to drink. Dong-Yun had done something to those tunnels that defied military logic. He had turned them into a living weapon that attacked our minds as much as our bodies. The humans would appear from nowhere, strike quickly, then vanish back into passages we could not find. But that was just the beginning. What else did they do? They left messages for us, written in perfect Kalani script on tunnel walls where we would find them. Messages like, "You are not welcome here," and "This is not your home, and we know you are afraid." How did they learn to write in our language? How did they know we were becoming afraid? These were questions that kept us awake at night. Vextar's forearms gestured nervously. The worst part was that we never saw the same human twice. Every encounter was with different faces, different voices, but they all knew things about us. Personal things. One fighter called me by name and asked about my family on Kalanos Prime. Another knew that sub-leader Nak Then had been relieved of duty. They had information they should not have been able to get. How is that possible? Dr. Ji-Young Park, Vextar said simply. She was down there with them, but she was not hiding. She was running a medical station for wounded resistance fighters, but she was also treating captured Kalani soldiers. Every prisoner who passed through her care was questioned but not tortured. They were asked about their families, their homes, their fears. She was gathering intelligence through compassion. Elena stared at him. She was using medical care as a way to learn about your forces? It was more complex than that. Yes, she gathered information, but she also genuinely cared for our wounded. She treated Kalani injuries with the same skill she used on human patients. She learned our names, remembered details about our families, asked about our pain levels and medical histories. She was simultaneously our enemy and our doctor. The alien took another long drink. 3 weeks into the tunnel operations, I was injured during a firefight with Dong-Hyun-Yoon's people. Shrapnel from a human explosive device cut through my lower left arm. My unit had to retreat, leaving me behind in a collapsed section of tunnel. What happened to you? I expected to die, either from blood loss or from execution when the resistance fighters found me. Instead, I woke up in Dr. Park's medical station. She had treated my wounds, given me pain medication, and posted guards to make sure no one disturbed my recovery. Vextar looked directly at Elena. When I was strong enough to sit up, she came to check on me. She asked how I was feeling, whether the pain medication was working, if I needed anything for comfort. Then she asked about my family, not for intelligence purposes, but because she genuinely wanted to know about the people I missed. How could you tell the difference? Because she told me about her own family first. Her parents, who ran a small restaurant in Seoul. Her younger brother, who was studying medicine before the war started. Her husband, who had been killed in the first week of fighting. She shared her own pain before asking about mine. The old warrior's voice became softer. I told her things I had never told anyone. about my mate Silvara and our 3 offspring back on Kalana's prime, about how I had joined the military to support them, about how I missed the sound of our children laughing, about how afraid I was that I would never see them again. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. What did she say? She said that all parents worry about the same things, no matter what species they are. She said that love feels the same whether you have 2 arms or 4, whether your eyes are brown or crystalline. She said that war makes everyone afraid, but being afraid does not make you weak. Vextar paused for a long moment. Then she did something that still haunts me. She took a photograph from her medical kit. It showed her with her dead husband, both of them smiling at the camera. She handed it to me and said, "So you remember that your enemies have families too. So you remember that we all have people we love." The alien reached into a pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. He placed it on the table between them. Elena could see 2 young humans smiling happily at the camera, unaware that war would soon tear them apart. I have carried this picture for 30 years. I look at it every day to remember what Dr. Park taught me in those tunnels. Elena studied the photograph. How long were you her prisoner? 5 days. During that time, I watched her treat 12 other wounded Kalani soldiers with the same care she had shown me. I also watched her coordinate medical support for the human resistance fighters. She was simultaneously healing the people who were trying to kill each other. Did she ever ask you for military information? Only once. On my last day there, she asked if I knew whether the Kalani forces had medical supplies for their own wounded. When I said we were running low on antibiotics, she gave me a package of human medical supplies to take back to my unit. Vextar's forearms moved restlessly. She said, "Infection does not care what species it attacks. These medicines will help your wounded soldiers just as they help mine." Then she helped me return to Kalani-controlled territory through a secret tunnel route. Elena shook her head in amazement. She let you go? She released all captured Kalani soldiers after treating their injuries. She said that holding prisoners would require resources better used for helping people. But before I left, she asked me to carry a message back to my commanders. What message? She said, "Tell them that we do not want to kill anyone. Tell them that we only fight because we have to. Tell them that there is room in this world for all of us, if only we can stop being afraid of each other." The alien veteran was quiet for a moment. When I delivered her message to my superiors, they accused me of being psychologically compromised. They said Dr. Park had manipulated me through false kindness. They assigned me to a different unit and ordered me to forget what had happened in the tunnels. But you couldn't forget. How could I forget? She had shown me something that changed everything I thought I knew about warfare, about enemies, about what it means to be human. In the tunnels of Soul, I learned that your species fights with weapons we had never encountered. Compassion, forgiveness, love for people you have never met. Vexitar picked up the photograph and looked at it again. Dr. Park died 2 weeks after she released me. Dong Yun sent word through resistance channels that she had been killed while treating wounded civilians during an orbital bombardment. She died trying to save people she had never met, people who could not even thank her for the sacrifice. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks. I'm sorry. Do not be sorry for her. Be proud of her. She did something that no Kalani soldier had ever seen. She won a war without firing a shot. She defeated enemies by healing them. She conquered hearts that armies could not touch. The old alien placed the photograph back in his pocket. After Dr. Park's death, something changed in our forces. The soldiers who had been treated by her started asking questions. Why were we fighting people who showed us kindness? Why were we conquering a world whose inhabitants offered us friendship even in the middle of war? What kind of questions? The dangerous kind. Questions that made us wonder if we were the villains in this story. Questions that made us realize that humans were not the primitive, violent species we had been told about. They were something much more dangerous than that. Elena waited for him to continue. They were better than us, better at war, better at peace, better at being the kind of species that deserves to inherit the galaxy. Vextar looked up at her with his strange, crystalline eyes, and that realization was about to change everything. Vextar had been drinking steadily as he told his story, but now he pushed his glass away and stared out the small window at the stars beyond. Elena could see that whatever memory came next was the most difficult of all. The end began on the 73rd day of the war, he said quietly. Our forces controlled most of the major cities, but the human resistance had grown stronger, not weaker. More importantly, our own soldiers were beginning to question the war itself. Elena checked her recording device again. Because of what Dr. Park and others had shown them? Partly, yes, but also because we were losing more soldiers to desertion than to combat. Every day, more Kalani warriors simply walked away from their units and disappeared into the countryside. Some tried to return home. Others went into hiding among human civilian populations. The old aliens' forearms moved nervously. Fleet Command decided that drastic action was needed. They authorized the use of orbital bombardment weapons that would sterilize entire regions. The plan was to destroy all major population centers and force the humans to surrender or face extinction. Genocide? Complete planetary pacification, they called it. The bombardment was scheduled to begin with the destruction of Sol, followed by every other major city on the continent. After that, they would demand the surrender of all remaining human military forces. Vextar turned back to face Elena. But something happened that none of our commanders expected. Captain Minho Kim, who had been presumed dead for weeks after the fall of his mountain position, emerged from the ruins of Sol with the largest coordinated human military action of the entire war. Elena leaned forward eagerly. What did he do? He had spent those weeks doing something no military strategist in the galaxy had ever attempted. He had united every surviving human military unit, resistance cell, and civilian defense group into a single coordinated force. Police officers, soldiers, firefighters, medical personnel, even civilian volunteers, all working together under a single command structure. The alien shook his head slowly. The attack began at dawn on the 74th day. Every Kalani position on the peninsula was hit simultaneously by human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. But this was not just a military assault. It was a demonstration. What kind of demonstration? Captain Kim had given specific orders to all human units. They were not fighting to kill Kalani soldiers. They were fighting to capture them alive and treat them well. The goal was not to destroy our forces, but to show the galaxy what kind of species humanity really was. Vexitar's crystalline eyes reflected the bar's dim lighting. I was stationed at a communication center outside Sol when the attack began. 200 human fighters surrounded our position, but instead of overwhelming us with firepower, they used loudspeakers to broadcast a message in perfect Kalani. What did the message say? It was Dr. Ji-Young Park's voice, a recording she had made before her death. She said, "We do not want to hurt you. We know you have families who love you. We know you are afraid and far from home. If you surrender, we will treat your injuries and help you contact your loved ones. If you fight, we will defend ourselves, but we will still help your wounded. The choice is yours." Elena stared at him in amazement. She was still trying to heal people even after she was dead? That was exactly what Captain Kim had planned. Every human attack was preceded by Dr. Park's message. Every human soldier carried medical supplies for treating Kalani wounded. Every human unit had orders to prioritize the safety of prisoners over tactical objectives. The old warrior was quiet for a moment. My unit surrendered without firing a shot. How could we fight people who were offering to heal us? How could we kill soldiers who were promising to help us call our families? It was not military tactics. It was something much more powerful. What happened to you after you surrendered? We were taken to a prisoner processing center that had been set up in an abandoned school. But it was not like any military prison I had ever seen. The humans had converted classrooms into medical stations, dormitories, and communication centers where Kalani prisoners could record messages to send home. Vextar's voice grew softer. Lieutenant Hyunwoo Lee was running the facility, the same officer who had coordinated communications for the human defense. When he saw me, he remembered that I had been treated by Dr. Park. He asked about my arm, whether it had healed properly, if I was experiencing any lasting pain from the injury. Elena felt tears forming again. Even as a prisoner, they were taking care of you? Better than our own military had ever taken care of us. The food was good, the medical attention was excellent, and the humans actually listened when we talked about missing our families. But the most surprising thing was what Lieutenant Lee asked me to do. What? He wanted me to help him set up communication links with the Kalani fleet. Not to provide military intelligence, but to broadcast messages from prisoners to their families back home. He said that people throughout the galaxy deserved to know that their loved ones were safe and being treated well. The alien gestured with two of his arms. Within hours, we had established communication channels that allowed captured Kalani soldiers to speak directly with their families on ships and worlds throughout the Empire. Parents could see that their children were alive and healthy. Mates could hear each other's voices across the vastness of space. Elena shook her head in wonder. They were using prisoners to improve morale among their own people? No, you still do not understand. They were not trying to improve morale. They were trying to end the war by showing the galaxy what humans really were. Every conversation between a Kalani prisoner and their family was broadcast on open channels. Every species in the local sector could hear Kalani soldiers telling their loved ones that humans were treating them with kindness and respect. Vextar picked up his glass again, but did not drink. The effect was immediate and devastating to our war effort. Kalani families started demanding that their government explain why they were fighting people who cared for prisoners better than the Empire cared for its own soldiers. Other species began questioning why they supported Kalani expansion if this was how we treated our enemies. What was the military response? Fleet Command ordered an immediate escalation. They moved the orbital bombardment schedule forward and prepared to destroy Sol within hours. But Captain Kim had anticipated this. He launched the final phase of his plan before our ships could fire. The alien's voice grew quiet with something that might have been awe. Lieutenant Lee coordinated the most sophisticated communication operation in galactic history. Using every satellite, relay station, and communication array on the planet, the humans broadcast a single message to every inhabited world within 50 light years. Elena held her breath. What was the message? It was a documentary. 3 hours of footage showing the entire war from the human perspective. It showed Captain Kim's soldiers sharing their food with hungry Kalani prisoners. It showed Dr. Park treating wounded enemies while under fire. It showed human civilians risking their lives to protect alien captives from their own angry neighbors. Vextar's forearms trembled slightly, but the most powerful part was the end. Captain Kim appeared on screen, standing in the ruins of Sol, surrounded by human and Kalani soldiers working together to treat wounded civilians. He looked directly into the camera and said something that changed galactic politics forever. What did he say? He said, "We are not fighting for conquest or revenge. We are fighting for the right to exist as free people in a galaxy where different species can live together in peace. We do not want to destroy the Kalani Empire. We want to show them that there is a better way to expand among the stars, a way that builds friendships instead of creating enemies." The old warrior finally took another drink. Then he did something that no military commander in galactic history had ever done. He offered to negotiate a peace treaty that would give the Kalani Empire everything they needed without requiring the conquest of Earth. Elena stared at him. What kind of deal? Trading partnerships, shared technology, cultural exchange programs, joint exploration missions. Everything the Empire claimed to want from conquering worlds, but achieved through cooperation instead of war. Captain Kim offered to make the Kalani Empire stronger through friendship than they could ever become through conquest. How did your government respond? Fleet Command rejected the offer immediately and ordered the orbital bombardment to proceed. But something had changed among our forces. The documentary had been broadcast to every Kalani ship in the fleet. Our own soldiers had seen what humans were really fighting for. Vextar's crystalline eyes grew dim. When the bombardment order came through, something unprecedented happened. Kalani ships began refusing to fire on civilian targets. Entire crews went into open mutiny rather than participate in genocide. Ship after ship dropped out of formation and withdrew from Earth orbit. Your own forces rebelled? More than that. They switched sides. Kalani ships began broadcasting messages of support for the human cause. Soldiers who had spent months trying to conquer Earth suddenly found themselves protecting it from their own government. The alien veteran looked directly at Elena. I was still in the prisoner camp when news of the fleet mutiny reached us. Lieutenant Lee called. Vextar remained standing for a long moment, his forearms trembling slightly as he stared out at the stars. Helena could see that whatever he was about to reveal was the heaviest burden he carried. Sit down, Helena said gently. Take your time. The old alien warrior slowly lowered himself back into his chair. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. The war officially ended 79 days after it began. The Treaty of Seoul was signed in the same bombed-out communications center, where Lieutenant Lee had coordinated the human defense. Representatives from both species, former enemies working together to build a better future. Elena waited patiently as Vextar gathered his strength to continue. I was released from the prisoner camp on the day the treaty was signed. Captain Kim personally thanked every Kalani prisoner for helping to end the conflict. Lieutenant Lee gave each of us communication devices so we could stay in contact with the human friends we had made. Dr. Park was given a posthumous medal for her service to both species. The alien reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn device. This is the communicator Lieutenant Lee gave me 30 years ago. I have never used it. I have been too ashamed. Ashamed of what? Vextar looked directly at Elena with his crystalline eyes. Of what I did after I returned to Kalani space. Of how I repaid the kindness humans had shown me. Of the choice I made when my own people needed to hear the truth about the war. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What happened when you went home? I was debriefed by Kalani intelligence services. They wanted to know everything about human military capabilities, psychological warfare techniques, and resistance organization methods. They said the information would be used to prevent future conflicts and improve relations between species. The old warrior's hands shook as he spoke. I told them everything. Every detail about Dr. Park's medical stations. Every tactic that Donghyun Yoon had used in the tunnels. Every method Captain Kim had employed to coordinate the resistance. I gave them a complete analysis of human psychological warfare techniques. Elena stared at him in horror. You betrayed the people who had saved your life? Worse than that. I helped my government develop countermeasures against human compassion. I provided intelligence that was used to train Kalani forces in how to resist psychological manipulation through kindness. I wrote reports that described human mercy as a tactical weakness that could be exploited. Vextar's voice cracked. For years after the war, I told myself that I was just being a loyal soldier, that I was protecting my people from human manipulation, that what I had experienced on Earth was not real friendship but sophisticated enemy psychological operations. But you knew better? Deep down, yes. I knew that Dr. Park had saved my life out of genuine compassion. I knew that Lieutenant Lee had treated me with real kindness. I knew that Captain Kim had offered true friendship to a species that had tried to destroy his world. The alien's forearms gestured helplessly. But admitting that meant admitting that I had betrayed the best people I had ever met. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks. What changed? Why are you telling me this now? Vextar reached into another pocket and pulled out the worn photograph that Dr. Park had given him decades earlier. He placed it on the table between them, next to the unused communicator. 5 years ago, my youngest offspring came to me with news that changed everything. She had been accepted into an exchange program at a human university on Earth. She was excited about studying human medicine and learning from the species that had revolutionized galactic healthcare. The old warrior touched the photograph gently. When she told me about her plans, I panicked. I tried to convince her not to go. I told her that humans were dangerous, that their kindness was manipulation, that she would be hurt if she trusted them. What did she say? She asked me to explain why every other species in the galaxy had begun adopting human methods of conflict resolution. Why Kalani hospitals were using medical techniques developed by human doctors. Why our own government had signed dozens of friendship treaties based on the model created by Captain Kim. Vextar's voice grew softer. She asked me to explain why, if humans were so dangerous, the galaxy had been more peaceful in the 30 years since the war than it had been in the 3 centuries before it. Elena waited as the alien composed himself. I could not answer her questions. Every argument I made against human trustworthiness was contradicted by 30 years of evidence. The galaxy had become a better place because of human influence. Species that had been enemies for generations were now allies. Wars that had seemed endless had been resolved through negotiation. So you let her go to Earth? I had no choice. But I also realized that I needed to know the truth about what humans had become. I started monitoring reports from the exchange program, reading about my daughter's experiences on your world. The alien picked up the photograph and looked at it with something that might have been reverence. Every message she sent home described acts of kindness from human students, professors, and families. She wrote about medical techniques that prioritized patient care over profit. She described a society that had built monuments to fallen enemies and maintained memorials, to the costs of war. Vextar looked directly at Elena. She met veterans of the Terran Galactic War, soldiers who had fought against my people but welcomed Kalani students with open arms. She learned about Dr. Park from humans who still remembered her sacrifice for wounded alien soldiers. What did your daughter think of humans? She loved them. She said that studying on Earth was like learning what it meant to be the best version of yourself. She said that humans had a way of seeing potential in other species that they could not see in themselves. The old warrior was quiet for a moment. When she returned home last year, she brought me a gift. A book written by Lieutenant Hunwoo Lee about the war and its aftermath. Inside the front cover was a handwritten note. Elena held her breath. The note said, "For Vextar, who taught us that former enemies can become family, we hope you are well and that your family is happy. You are always welcome on Earth. Your friend, Hunwoo Lee." Vextar's crystalline eyes filled with something that might have been tears. He remembered me. After 30 years, he remembered a Kalani prisoner who had helped him end a war. He had tracked down my family name and sent a message of friendship to someone who had betrayed everything he represented. That's when you decided to tell your story? That's when I realized that my real shame was not what I had done during the war, but what I had done after it. I had taken the greatest gift anyone had ever given me, the gift of human friendship, and I had buried it under lies and self-deception. The alien picked up the communicator Lieutenant Lee had given him decades earlier. I contacted him 3 months ago. I told him everything. About the intelligence reports, about the betrayal, about the 30 years of denial and shame. Elena watched as Vextar activated the device. He forgave me, just like that. He said that forgiveness was what Dr. Park would have wanted. He said that admitting mistakes was the first step toward making things right. He asked if I would be willing to tell my story to help other species understand what humans had taught us about war and peace. The old warrior looked up at Elena. That is why I agreed to this interview, not to ease my own guilt, but to honor the memory of Dr. Ji-Young Park, who died believing that enemies could choose to become friends. To honor Captain Minho Kim, who proved that the strongest victory is the one that creates no losers. To honor Lieutenant Hunwoo Lee, who showed that communication is more powerful than conquest. Elena realized that the interview was coming to an end, but she had one more question. What do you want people to understand about humans? Vextar thought for a long moment before answering. I want them to understand that when humans fight, they are not fighting for territory or resources or dominance. They are fighting for the idea that all species deserve to exist free from fear. They are fighting for a galaxy where differences are celebrated instead of conquered. The alien stood up again, this time with more strength than before. But most importantly, I want them to understand that humans do not just win wars. They win hearts. They win minds. They win the future by showing everyone else what the future could be. He gathered the photograph and the communicator, holding them like precious treasures. Every species in the galaxy is stronger because humans exist. Every world is safer because humans taught us that there is an alternative to endless conflict. Every family in the galaxy sleeps better at night because humans proved that enemies can become friends. Elena turned off her recording device as Vextar prepared to leave. What will you do now? The old Kalani warrior smiled, an expression that looked strange on his alien features but somehow conveyed the same warmth that humans showed to their friends. I am going home to Kalanos Prime. I am going to tell my people the truth about the war. I am going to work with human medical organizations to establish clinics in honor of Dr. Park's memory. He paused at the door of the space station bar. And I am going to teach my grandchildren that the most important lesson of the Terran Galactic War was not how to fight enemies, but how to make friends. Dr. Park was right. Pain is pain, no matter what species feels it.